Zyn, the small, unassuming nicotine pouch, has rapidly taken over America.
You may have heard of Zyn.
The Zyn product.
The most popular brand, Zyn, surging in sales.
Driven by growing consumer preference for smoke-free options, Zyn has quickly become a household name. With over 400 million cans sold so far in 2024 alone, this trend is making its parent company millions, while also catching the attention of regulators across the country. So in this video, we're going to dive into how Zyn's popularity skyrocketed, why Wall Street's keeping a close eye on its performance, and whether looming regulations might put a damper on its unstoppable rise. In 2022, tobacco giant Phillip Morris International acquired Swedish Match, the maker of Zyn, for $16 billion. Now, this wasn't just any acquisition. For PMI, a company historically tied to traditional combustible tobacco products like Marlboro, it marked a deliberate pivot. PMI recognized the global decline in smoking rates and the fading popularity of vaping, a market once seen as the future of nicotine products. But this left a void, a space for something new, and Zyn stepped in. But Zyn isn't actually a new product. Swedish Match introduced Zyn to the US market back in 2014 as a small test run, rolling it out exclusively in Western states. The idea was simple: offer consumers a discreet, smoke-free nicotine experience with minimal health risks compared to smoking. Now, after gaining early traction, Swedish Match quickly scaled up, placing Zyn in over 4,000 stores by 2016. And that's when things really started to take off. Because by 2018, US sales had already reached 12.7 million cans. The popularity of nicotine pouches surged as health-conscious consumers, ex-smokers, and nicotine users seeking convenience embraced Zyn as an alternative to traditional smoking. The absence of tobacco and a user-friendly format, small pouches tucked discreetly between the lip and the gum, were key selling points. And it provided a nicotine hit without the smoke, smell, or social stigma of smoking. Zyn also benefits from clever marketing and broad distribution. Swedish Match and PMI invested heavily in branding that speaks to adults looking for convenient, portable nicotine options. This is partially due to the category of nicotine that Zyn falls under, but more on that later. The pouches are available in a variety of flavors and strengths, which allows consumers to customize their experience. Moreover, Zyn is prominently available in convenience stores where many smokers and former smokers are already accustomed to purchasing their nicotine products. The wide availability made Zyn accessible to the masses, and once placed on the counter of thousands of convenience stores, Zyn didn't just attract smokers, it captured a wider audience, including those who had never even smoked before. Fast forward to today, and Zyn's growth is nothing short of remarkable. In the first quarter of 2024 alone, Zyn sold an impressive 131 million cans, a year-over-year growth of almost 80%. And by mid-2024, sales figures had already reached over 266 million cans in the US alone. And Zyn is now on track to sell somewhere between 560 and 580 million cans by the end of the year, with a roughly 76% share of the US nicotine pouch market. Zyn has effectively cornered the industry, and this growth has Wall Street excited for a few reasons. First, nicotine pouches like Zyn have proven to be highly profitable. And that's because, unlike cigarettes, they're subject to fewer regulatory taxes and lower production costs. The margins on Zyn are reportedly very strong, which makes each can sold a high-margin revenue generator. For PMI, this is a rare, high-growth, high-margin opportunity in an otherwise declining market. PMI's stock price hit a record high in October when they announced their third quarter earnings after they raised their annual profit forecasts and beat revenue estimates, largely thanks to the rise in popularity of Zyn. Zyn's success offers PMI a steady revenue stream that's largely unaffected by the typical regulatory pressures faced by traditional tobacco products. Currently, nicotine pouches are not as heavily scrutinized or taxed as combustible products, as that regulatory loophole has allowed Zyn to thrive. But this advantage may be short-lived if regulators step in, which some already have. As Zyn's market share grows, so do calls for stricter oversight. Currently, Zyn operates in a regulatory gray area due to its status as a tobacco-free, smoke-free product. However, mounting concerns have spurred the FDA and lawmakers into action. In fact, the FDA recently paused online sales of Zyn due to pending regulatory reviews. This resulted in a temporary shortage across the country for Zyn. The FDA cited the need to evaluate Zyn's safety profile, particularly as the product's appeal among younger users, which continues to draw scrutiny. Political leaders are also weighing in. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer publicly called for an investigation into Zyn's marketing practices.
It's a pouch packed with problems.
Expressing concern that the product's variety of flavors and discreet format might attract younger users. Schumer and others argue that Zyn could act as a gateway to nicotine dependence, similar to how flavored vaping products gained popularity before facing major restrictions. But what does the data say about youth consumption around nicotine pouches? Well, federal data suggests that usage among teens is extremely low, around 1.5% in fact, which is a stark contrast to the over 10% for vaping products. This data point, along with others, is what helped strengthen regulations around vaping throughout the US. This indicates that while nicotine pouches are not completely free from youth usage, their popularity among teens remains significantly lower than vaping products. Further complicating matters though, some states are already imposing their own restrictions and taxes. For instance, several states have recently introduced a tax on nicotine pouches, categorizing them with traditional tobacco products like cigarettes. These state-level actions hint at a potential wave of similar measures which could be enacted across the country. These measures could erode Zyn's profit margins and limit its price advantage over traditional tobacco products. States such as Utah, Nevada, New Hampshire, Maine, California, Massachusetts, and others are enacting taxes on nicotine pouches, although the rates and implementation of these taxes vary. For example, in Minnesota and Maine, the tax for these nicotine pouches is set similar to those of tobacco products. While Massachusetts has this tax as well, they've also taken a different approach by banning flavored nicotine products entirely. This trend shows a growing interest among states in regulating nicotine pouches, either through taxation or through restrictive sales policies to control their spread and potentially discourage usage, which in my opinion sets a rather confusing double standard for consumers, where on one hand we have a ton of data around the negative health impacts from smoking, which everyone knows because it's been studied for years. But currently there isn't any strong data to support nicotine pouches causing cancer. This is due to the relatively new presence on the market, and comprehensive studies on the long-term effects of the nicotine pouches are lacking. While I'm certainly not saying using nicotine is harmless, because it most definitely is not, the distinction between tobacco-free pouches and products such as cigarettes should be clearly noted. Regardless, these taxes impact Zyn's profit margins as they drive up the price at the point of sale, which consumers do bear a large portion of this cost increase. The tax can also reduce demand by making Zyn products more expensive, thereby decreasing overall sales volumes and potentially squeezing profit margins for the manufacturer. In Minnesota, the tax is 95% of the wholesale price, which could lead to a $3 to $4 rise in the price of a Zyn can. This might shift consumer demand or encourage users to switch to alternatives if the cost becomes prohibitive. Meanwhile, Swedish Match's application for FDA approval as a modified risk tobacco product, aka MRTP, is still pending. Approval, though, would solidify Zyn's position as a reduced risk product, providing it with a unique marketing advantage. However, if the FDA ultimately denies this designation, Zyn could be forced to overhaul its marketing and face stricter restrictions, significantly impacting its growth. Now, the regulatory landscape surrounding Zyn is complex and is rapidly evolving. With federal and state bodies increasing their focus on nicotine pouches, Zyn's future isn't guaranteed at all, and its success may hinge on how it adapts to these new rules and restrictions. But one thing is clear: Zyn's explosive growth showcases a broader shift in the nicotine market as a whole. PMI and other companies are focusing on what they call reduced risk products, betting that smoke-free nicotine options are the future. And PMI is betting big on this trend and investing millions in making sure it can fulfill demand. They've already spent an estimated $115 million to expand their production facility in Owensboro, Kentucky. And they just recently announced that they were investing $600 million to build a brand new production facility for Zyn in Colorado, signaling that they're confident in the continued growth of Zyn despite any potential regulatory risks. For consumers, Zyn's popularity suggests that the demand for convenient, smoke-free alternatives is likely to keep growing, especially if more people seek ways to consume nicotine without the drawbacks of smoking or vaping. But if regulation catches up, PMI will face a new set of challenges. Now, in an industry that has been particularly in decline over the last several years, Zyn has managed to quietly consume America. With millions of cans sold each year, Zyn has captivated consumers, intrigued Wall Street, and now caught the eye of regulators. Whether this success will be sustainable depends entirely on how the FDA responds and how PMI navigates the looming regulatory landscape. Only time will tell if Zyn can maintain its grip on the American market, but for now, it remains one of the more interesting success stories in recent years. If you made it this far in the video, please consider subscribing and check out this video next.